Let's rewind to the early days of the Cold War, a time when paranoia wasn't just running high, it was practically government policy. Behind the scenes, the US government wasn't just preparing for battle with the Soviet Union, it was preparing for a war of the mind. And right in the middle of this psychological arms race was a man named Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. At first glance, Gottlieb was no James Bond villain. He was the CIA's chief chemist, a soft-spoken man with a limp and a passion for biochemistry. But behind closed doors, he was running one of the darkest, most twisted experiments ever authorized by the United States government. It was called MK Ultra. This wasn't some one-off project. This was an all-out crusade to unlock the secrets of mind control, no matter how many people were hurt along the way. The war that never really ended. After World War II, President Harry Truman shut down the Office of Strategic Services, thinking the US didn't need an intelligence agency during peacetime. But the peace didn't last. The Soviet Union emerged as the next big threat, and within just a couple of years, Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947, officially creating the CIA. It didn't take long before the CIA was dabbling in psychological warfare. And when they saw a Hungarian cardinal confess to absurd crimes in a zombie-like daze during a Soviet show trial, they freaked out. Had the Soviets discovered a real method of mind control? If they had, it wasn't just scary, it was an existential threat. Imagine a world where the enemy could brainwash spies, civilians, even politicians. That fear led to the creation of Project Bluebird, the CIA's first attempt at cracking the code of the human mind. Enter Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA's dark sorcerer, Alan Dulles, the CIA director at the time, needed someone bold, brilliant, and morally flexible to take this program further, and that someone was Gottlieb. Despite being born with physical disabilities, Gottlieb had an impressive academic background. He studied chemistry, got his PhD from Caltech, and worked on all sorts of government science projects. When the CIA came calling in 1951, he didn't just sign up, he took over. Bluebird soon became Project Artichoke, and Gottlieb went wild. He wasn't just experimenting on willing agents anymore. He was testing on prisoners of war, psychiatric patients, and even random people off the street. Anyone the CIA deemed expendable became a human lab rat. He tried cocaine, heroin, mescaline, but none of them quite did the trick. Then he discovered LSD. Gottlieb was so fascinated by this Swiss-invented hallucinogen that he took it himself. He believed it was the key to unlocking the mind's deepest layers and possibly controlling them. He convinced the CIA to buy the world's remaining supply of LSD, and with that, Project MK Ultra was born. On April 13, 1953, CIA Director Alan Dulles officially gave the green light to a program that would become one of the darkest and most disturbing chapters in American intelligence history. It was called MK Ultra. At its core, it was a covert operation designed to investigate and ultimately control the human mind through drugs, hypnosis, psychological torture, and sensory manipulation. But it didn't stop there. MK Ultra would grow into the CIA's most secretive and wide-reaching experiment ever attempted, with a level of ambition that bordered on science fiction. The man chosen to run it was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist with a twisted curiosity and the power to act on it. Under his command, MK Ultra branched into hundreds of subprojects, each one weirder and more disturbing than the last. And despite the number of people involved across various agencies, universities, and institutions, only 2 individuals, Gottlieb and one other high-level CIA officer, knew the full scope of what was being done. The rest were compartmentalized, misled, or outright lied to. MK Ultra seeped into every crack of society. CIA-backed experiments were carried out at top universities, military bases, and hospitals. Mental institutions were used as testing grounds, often without the patient's knowledge or consent. In some cases, even brothels were secretly set up as safe houses, where unsuspecting men were drugged and observed from behind two-way mirrors. These weren't isolated incidents. They were planned, funded, and deliberately carried out under the belief that America's enemies might already be doing the same. Gottlieb's obsession centered on one major question. Could LSD unlock or break the human mind? He wanted to know how much of the drug it would take to fracture a person's sense of reality entirely. Could it be used to erase memories, to rewrite beliefs? Could you destroy someone's identity and implant a new one like reprogramming a machine? In one particularly brutal experiment, prisoners were subjected to daily LSD doses for over 2 straight months. The effects weren't just terrifying, they were irreversible. Hallucinations, psychosis, cognitive damage. These men didn't just lose touch with reality, Some never fully returned. In another case, massive amounts of LSD were administered to inmates in juvenile detention centers and federal prisons. The subjects weren't told what was happening. They weren't offered a choice. They were simply used, raw material for a dark experiment in mind control. And make no mistake, this wasn't about treating mental illness or curing addiction. The end goal wasn't healing, it was destruction. Gottlieb believed the key to reprogramming a human brain was to first reduce it to rubble, strip away the ego, erase the identity, and leave behind an empty shell. Only then, he theorized, could a new personality be built from scratch, one that would follow orders, believe false truths, or forget secrets. But it didn't work. Despite years of testing and countless lives damaged or destroyed, MK Ultra never delivered what it promised. The human mind proved more complex, more resilient, and far less programmable than Gottlieb had hoped. Instead of creating super spies or controllable assets, the CIA ended up with broken men and women, haunted by trauma and lost in madness. All Gottlieb truly succeeded in doing was pushing the boundaries of ethics, science, and decency so far that the fallout would continue for decades. MK Ultra wasn't just a failed experiment in mind control. It was a national disgrace, hidden under layers of secrecy, until fragments of the truth began to emerge years later. And even today, much of what really happened still remains buried. Operation Midnight Climax. If that wasn't dark enough, MK Ultra took an even weirder turn in 1955. Gottlieb relocated some of his operations to San Francisco. There, the CIA set up apartments rigged with recording devices and one-way mirrors. Women were hired to lure men from the street, drug them with LSD, and then have sex with them, all while CIA agents watched and recorded every move. This was Subproject 42, better known as Operation Midnight Climax. The stated goal? To test how drugs and sex could be used for interrogation or blackmail. But in reality, it blurred the line between research and depravity. Agents openly admitted they weren't always just observing, they joined in the fun too. Across the border in Canada, another dark chapter unfolded. Donald Ewan Cameron, a leading psychiatrist, was working on a method he called psychic driving. Funded by MK Ultra's Subproject 68, Cameron put patients into drug-induced comas, blasted them with high-voltage electroshock, and looped recorded messages like, "Your mother hates you," for weeks on end. These were regular people, many just suffering from mild anxiety or depression. What they got instead was mental destruction. The long-term damage was horrific, and it was all paid for by the CIA. By the late 50s, MK Ultra was a massive operation. But the more they experimented, the more the results slipped away. LSD didn't create controllable agents. It just made people trip out. Ironically, the very drug Gottlieb hoped would let the CIA take control ended up sparking the opposite. LSD spread to college campuses, then the streets. It helped fuel the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Hippies weren't being controlled. They were dropping out of society. By the early 60s, the writing was on the wall. MK Ultra had failed. Gottlieb stepped away from the project, and the CIA slowly began to distance itself. But the damage was done. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission finally revealed the shocking truth. The CIA had conducted experiments on unwitting Americans. They'd spied on civilians, opened private mail, even tested drugs without consent. MK Ultra wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. And yet, much of the evidence was destroyed. Gottlieb himself ordered boxes of documents burned in the early 70s. What we know today is just the tip of the iceberg. We may never fully understand the scope of MK Ultra, but what's crystal clear is this. It was one of the darkest chapters in American history. It was a government program built on fear, run by people who believed the ends justify the most brutal means, all in the name of national security. So the next time you hear someone talking about mind control as if it's some wild conspiracy theory, remember MK Ultra, because once upon a time, it wasn't just real. It was happening in our own backyard. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.